Hello, you're watching A News. I'm Nadia Jani. Here are the top stories. Trump says the US will continue to work to resolve Gaza crisis. Dutch ministers resign over disagreements on Gaza policy. And Putin says he sees light at the end of the tunnel for US-Russia relations. First this evening, US President Donald Trump has reaffirmed his administration's commitment to resolving the ongoing hostage crisis in Israel. Speaking on Friday, he called the situation extortion and insisted it must come to an end. Trump pointed to his past record on securing hostage releases and assured families that efforts are underway to free those still held in Gaza. His comments came as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Israel is ready to resume negotiations following Hamas's acceptance of a temporary ceasefire plan mediated by Egypt and Qatar.
You know, I'm very proud to say I got the hostages out. You have hundreds of people that are living now because of me. And now we have that final little group of people. And Hamas knows that if they give them, that's probably the end of their lives. So it's not easy to get. And I know if you're a parent, you just don't care. You want, I want my baby back. They want their babies back. They want their kids back. And I understand it. But I got them out and did a good job. And we're doing everything we can to get the hostages out. Thank you.
But the humanitarian situation in Gaza deepens. A UN-backed body has declared that people living in Gaza City are experiencing famine conditions of starvation, destitution and death, and warned it could extend to central and southern Gaza by September. However, Israel disagrees.
Gaza City and its surrounding area is now experiencing famine, a UN-backed body of food security experts has confirmed. United Nations Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, which is used by governments and international bodies to identify hunger levels around the world, has raised its classification to Phase 5, the highest and most severe. It says that over 500,000 people across the Gaza Strip are facing catastrophic conditions characterized by starvation, destitution, and death. It also marks the first time a famine has been officially confirmed in Gaza.
The famine declared today in Gaza Governorate by the IPC is the direct result of actions taken by the Israeli government. It has unlawfully restricted the entry and distribution of humanitarian assistance and other goods necessary for the survival of the civilian population in the Gaza Strip.
Hamas calls for urgent action as UN confirms Gaza famine situation. But Israel dismissed the findings as false and biased, saying the IPC had based its survey on partial data largely provided by Hamas, which did not take into account a recent influx of food.
Staying on this topic, Dutch Foreign Minister Casper Veldkamp resigned from the caretaker government after his proposal for new sanctions against Israel, including a ban on imports from settlements, was blocked by coalition partners. His departure triggered the exit of all remaining ministers and state secretaries from his new social contract party, impacting Prime Minister Dick Schoof's administration deeper into crisis ahead of the upcoming October elections. The move follows mounting international alarm over escalating famine and humanitarian suffering in Gaza City. Turning to Ukraine, Zelensky has renewed calls for direct talks with Vladimir Putin and has accused Russia of stalling. Meanwhile, the US and Europe are warning Moscow of mounting costs if the war drags on.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked National Flag Day on Saturday with a defiant message. He said Ukraine will never cede its territories to Russia. The ceremony, held on the eve of Ukraine's Independence Day, was attended by the country's top officials.
І цей прапор – це мета This flag is a goal and dream for many Ukrainians on temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. They keep the flag. They keep it because they know that we will not gift our land to an occupier. This flag symbolizes the dearest thing for hundreds of our warriors, men and women from all over Ukraine who defend not just a specific direction of the front line, not just Vovchansk or Dobropilya, but entire Ukraine.
З усієї нашої України, які захищають не лише той чи
Zelensky also accused Russia of blocking his attempts to meet with President Vladimir Putin. He stressed that a direct meeting is the only way to negotiate an end to the war. Russia's foreign minister said the agenda for such talks is not yet ready. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has renewed a threat to impose sanctions on Russia. On Friday, he warned Moscow that if there is no progress toward peace in the next 2 weeks, he will take what he called a very important decision.
Well, then I'm going to make a decision as to what we do. And it's going to be a very important decision. And that's whether or not it's massive sanctions or massive tariffs or both. Or do we do nothing and say it's your fight?
He also voiced anger at a Russian strike on an American factory in Ukraine this week, which caused a fire and injured several workers. The European Union has echoed Zelensky's stance. The bloc's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, said Ukraine should not be pressured to give up land for peace. In an interview with the BBC, she described such concessions as a trap that Putin wants the West to walk into. NATO has also expressed support. General Giuseppe Cavo Dragone, head of the alliance's military committee, said military aid to Ukraine will increase. He added that stronger sanctions against Russia are needed and insisted that Ukraine must negotiate from a position of strength.
President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed NATO chief Mark Rutte to Kyiv on Friday for talks on security guarantees. Speaking at a joint press conference, Zelensky said the guarantees ought to be similar to NATO's Article 5, which considers an attack on one member of the alliance as an attack against all. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he sees light at the end of the tunnel for Russia-U.S. relations, following, as he put it, a very good, meaningful and frank summit with President Donald Trump in Alaska. He credited Trump's leadership as a potential catalyst for mending ties that impacted post-Cold War lows and noted both nations are exploring joint ventures in the Arctic and Alaska. Despite geopolitical tensions, Putin's comments signal cautious optimism, highlighting that progress now hinges on US leadership.
As for our relations with the United States, they are in the lowest level since World War II. I've said this many times. But with the arrival of President Trump, we are starting to see light in the end of the tunnel. And recently, we've had a very good and frank meeting in Alaska. The contacts continue on the ministerial and officials and business level. I really hope that the first steps that have been taken are just the beginning of a full-scale restoration of our relations. This doesn't depend on us. It depends on our Western partners, first of all, in the wider sense, because the US are bound by certain obligations in various associations, including the North Atlantic Bloc. Therefore, the next steps now depend on the leadership of the United States.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held a joint phone conversation with his French, German and British counterparts, as well as the EU foreign policy chief. The conversation focused on Tehran's peaceful nuclear program and the removal of sanctions. Our Tarar Shiralilu has more.
Foreign Minister Araghchi discussed Iran's nuclear program and removal of the sanctions with the foreign ministers of European powers, France, Germany and the UK, along with the EU foreign policy chief. The foreign ministry said in a statement the Iranian foreign minister warned the European side about their threat to call for reactivation of UN nuclear sanctions. The conversation was held before the deadline set by the European powers to demand the snapback mechanism or return of UN nuclear sanctions in October if they do not reach an agreement with Iran by end of August. It was agreed that Iran and the European Troika will negotiate again next Tuesday at the level of the deputy foreign ministers. In an interview with IRNA news agency, Araqchi said the IFRI suggested extension of the expiry of UN Resolution 2231 beyond 18th of October, out of understanding that they would fail in their bid. In the meantime, Tehran has stepped up its diplomatic contacts with Beijing and Moscow, which, similar to the European powers, are signatories of the 2015 JCPOA Iran nuclear agreement. China and Russia, which are both permanent members of the UN Security Council, wielding the veto power, have openly opposed the reactivation of UN nuclear sanctions against Iran. Araqchi also said that Iran will dispatch a delegation to Vienna to meet officials from the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, in coming days to discuss new cooperation modality in the wake of the 12-day war last June. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
Turkey says it will send military experts to Syria. It's aimed at assessing defense needs and drawing up a joint plan for restructuring the Syrian armed forces. Our correspondent Aliyah Aziz has more.
Turkey's defense ministry says it will send experts to Syria for technical visits to assess defense needs and draft a joint roadmap to rebuild the Syrian armed forces. Officials explained that technical visits mean delegations of Turkish military experts will travel to Syrian bases and institutions to evaluate gaps in training, equipment, and logistics. The findings will guide joint programs for rebuilding Syria's defense capacity. The announcement comes after the signing of a joint training and consultancy memorandum of understanding on August 13th, which officials say has already sped up military cooperation. Under the agreement, Syrian officers have started official visits, including a recent trip by the Damascus Training Department chief to Turkey's National Defense University. Training sessions are underway at Syria's request, part of what both sides describe as a long-term effort to restructure the Syrian armed forces under the principle of one state, one army. The ministry underlined that this cooperation is being coordinated directly with Syria's defense ministry and is aimed at ensuring regional peace and stability after more than a decade of civil war. At the same time, officials rejected speculation that Turkey is preparing to send peacekeeping troops to Ukraine, insisting no such deployment is under discussion. Next steps in Syria are expected to include border training initiatives, more on-the-ground technical visits, and rebuilding Syria's defense institutions, as Ankara positions itself as a central partner in Syria's reconstruction and regional security. For A News, this is Aliyah Aziz, Istanbul, Turkey.
Regional cooperation is deepening in Central Asia as Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan set ambitious new economic targets. The two presidents have unveiled a roadmap aimed at tripling trade and expanding joint infrastructure projects.
Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan have agreed to boost their bilateral trade turnover to $3 billion within the next 5 years. Presidents Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and Sadir Japarov announced at a joint press conference in Bishkek on Friday. Tokayev said the goal builds on strong momentum, with trade reaching $1.7 billion last year and showing positive results in the first half of 2025. To achieve the target, the two sides signed a special roadmap and outlined several priority projects. Among them is the planned launch of an industrial trade and logistics complex on the Kazakh-Kyrgyz border next year, as well as the creation of a wholesale distribution centre for agricultural products in Kazakhstan's Almaty region. The leaders also stressed the importance of agriculture, which already accounts for 25% of trade, and agreed to enhance cooperation in infrastructure, including construction of a road from Almaty to Issyk-Kul. Tokayev highlighted Kazakhstan's long-standing economic role in Kyrgyzstan, noting $1.4 billion in investments over the past 2 decades, including in socially significant projects. He further expressed Astana's support for Kyrgyzstan's bid for a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council in 2027 to 2028. Japarov, for his part, welcomed the favourable political climate between the two neighbours, saying it provides a solid foundation for growing trade, attracting investment and strengthening cultural humanitarian ties.
Staying on Afghanistan and Kazakhstan, the two countries are strengthening cooperation in the health sector. Kabul's Minister of Public Health met with the ambassador of Kazakhstan to discuss ways of expanding medical support and training opportunities. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more.
The Minister of Public Health met with the ambassador of Kazakhstan in Kabul, where both sides discussed improving the skills of Afghan healthcare workers, expanding services in remote areas, providing hospital equipment, and sharing expertise in controlling infectious diseases. The minister stressed that Afghanistan is working to build general hospitals in over 300 districts, with the goal of reducing maternal and child mortality and ensuring equal access to healthcare across the country. He called on Kazakhstan to support these efforts either by providing equipment or investing in the construction of hospitals, particularly in northern Afghanistan. The ambassador reaffirmed Kazakhstan's commitment, calling Afghanistan a friendly partner, and pledged training opportunities for Afghan doctors and nurses, as well as sending technical teams to support joint programs. This meeting reflects broader bilateral ties between the two nations. Kazakhstan has been active in Afghanistan through trade, education, and humanitarian aid, including wheat exports and scholarships for Afghan students. Health cooperation now adds another dimension in this relationship, as both countries seek to expand mutual engagement. Officials on both sides say the new initiatives mark an important step in strengthening Afghanistan-Kazakhstan relations, with healthcare emerging as a key area of focus for future cooperation. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Turkey has laid the foundation for a major new railway linking Kars, Igdir, Aralık and Dilaju. Transport and Infrastructure Minister Abdulkadir Uralulu says the line will serve as a key to opening the Zangezur corridor. He called the project both geopolitical and geostrategic, boosting trade, strengthening cooperation in the South Caucasus and supporting peace. He also highlighted Turkey's wider investments.
Over the past 23 years, Turkey has invested $300 billion in transport infrastructure, with $64 billion allocated to railways. In 2025, an additional 3,000 kilometres of new track have been added, bringing our total railway length to 14,000 kilometres. This railway will make a major contribution to regional and global trade. The project once again proves Turkey's mission of mediation and its contribution to peace. Turkey is presenting a vision that considers the future of the global economy. Kars will be the Iron Gateway, Igdir will become a global trade hub, while Aralık and Dilaju will be the key to the Zangezur corridor. The Kars, Igdir, Aralık, Dilaju railway line is more than a transport project. It is a road of unity, prosperity and peace that will resonate internationally. This route will strengthen economic cooperation in the South Caucasus, accelerate the opening of borders and speed up the normalization of diplomatic relations.
To discuss the new railway line, the connectivity which is part of the wider Zangezur corridor concept, I'm now joined by former diplomat Mehmet Akutçu. Good evening.
Good evening.
My first question to you is, can you talk us through the significance of this particular project?
Well, this is a real breakthrough, because Turkey and Azerbaijan always wanted to direct connection via Nakhchivan, and this was not possible at the time when Russia had the agreement signed in the brokerage or moderation of between Azerbaijani and Armenian presidents. It's possible to create this transport. Amazing that it happened in such a quick time, because it was only a couple of weeks ago that they signed the historic deal, and now Turkey are following it through with longer than 200 kilometers, carrying almost 5.5 million passengers a year and huge cargoes as well. It is good for Azerbaijan, it's good for Armenia, it's good also for Turkey. This will also make it possible, as the minister said, a global connection all the way from China to the United Kingdom through this critical transit crossing, Zengezur, and it will be possible to have a new line, transportation line, a new trading route, and also it's going to be a railway for peace as well, hopefully.
And the Akban-Horadiz railway link is almost completed alongside Turkey's new railway plan. Do you think that this will actually place constructive pressure on Armenia to accelerate and open a corridor in its southern territory?
I think so, because current government in power, led by Pashinyan, they are determined to follow it through. But in our geography, you never know how things evolve. If there is a change of government in Armenia, if Iran and Russia will have the upper hand, there are risks. But despite all these risks inherent in this project, I'm delighted to see that Turkey and Azerbaijan are moving forward with this project. It will create a fait accompli as well in the region. Once you have such links connecting one another, I think political process will be much smoother and easier. But the key question here is that such corridors should be win-win, providing benefits not only to Azerbaijan and Turkey, but also to Armenia. And also, as I said, part of China's Belt and Road Initiative will be reaching through this transportation line to Turkey, and from Turkey to Europe all the way to the United Kingdom. So it has global and regional implications. Understand has been arranged already. Almost $3 billion of finance will be coming from us, including from Israel and the European Union.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me this evening and explaining that, Mehmet. Thank you. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has issued a statement marking the 35th anniversary of Armenia's declaration of independence. He said that Armenia adopted the Real Armenia strategy, enabling peace with Azerbaijan, dialogue with Turkey, and closer ties with Georgia, Iran, and international partners. He stressed that Armenia's sovereignty and borders are now more secure, calling peace the basis of a more promising future. 30 young students from Azerbaijan achieved places at some of the world's leading universities as part of a BP Azerbaijan initiative. Some of those universities include Cambridge, Imperial College London, and the National University of Singapore. The event was hosted on Friday where students were handed certificates, and BP's regional vice president Bakhtiar Aslan Belli congratulated them for their hard work. The event was made possible through the collaboration of BP Azerbaijan and Ruf Academy, highlighting years of initiatives to nurture local talent, particularly students from low-income families. That's your news update for now from Baku, and for more updates, stay tuned to A News.